15 sites that SSPXers miss when they go on pilgrimage to the Holy Land. So, in case you didn't know, SSPX, Society of St. Pius X, does traditional Catholic pilgrimages for SSPX pilgrims to the Holy Land. They have SSPX priests who come in, they say at SSPX Mass at the holy sites, and it's a great blessing. Check out Regina Pilgrimages, go with them now. I love them. I love the work they do. I was fortunate enough to get to go to confession with an SSPX priest while I've been in the Holy Land, even though unfortunately I had just missed the Mass, much to my annoyance. That being said, they miss some things. There are certain things in the Holy Land that should be right on the top of the things that SSPXers are visiting, because they have so much relevance to our positions as traditional Catholics, as supporters of the Society of St. Pius X, but they're almost never on the itinerary. So, in fact, there's so many of them, I was going to do just the top 10. I had to make 15, because there's so much that is relevant. So starting with number 15, going to the number 1 site I think trad Caths should visit when they visit Jerusalem that they're not visiting. Let's take a look. So, number 15, Tel Hadzor. For those of you who are not familiar, Tel Hadzor is a city mentioned in the Bible as one of the cities destroyed by Joshua. It is a late Bronze, early Iron 1 site that dates to the time of Joshua. They found it. And based on the archaeological evidence, just like the Bible says, it was the head of a major Canaanite polity in the north of Canaan at the time of Joshua, and was destroyed by a massive fire. And there's also a major site called Building 7050. There's debate as to whether or not it was the royal palace, which would have been the palace of King Jabneh-Hadzor, or else the city's main temple. And even when the Israelites resettled on the site and the Iron II, that's like around the time of King Solomon, etc., they knew about that site and intentionally avoided building on it. But so yeah, go to Tel Hadzor if you get the chance. Number 14. This is actually pretty good. There's a number of Iron 1 sites. So it's not one site, but many. One site near Jerusalem would be Tel Gilo, and it would be a bunch of Iron 1 sites, what we think are early Israelite settlements. So they're very simple in their design. Essentially, they look like this. Essentially, they'd be an unfortified community. You just walk in, and all these little rooms here would be houses. They have a big central courtyard, and this common wall that they all share would be unfortified. This is significant because they just pop up all of a sudden, almost all at once, in the early Iron 1, around the time Joshua would have been coming to land. And what's interesting, I learned this in class, is that this settlement pattern is what you would expect from nomads who are coming in to settle in the land. So we know that it was nomads. Even people who question if it was the Israelites, or question the Exodus story, admit that there was a nomadic group that was in the land of Canaan that settled here and became Israel, as mentioned in the Mernifta stele. So that's another thing you should definitely visit if you come here, because it confirms so much about the Bible. Number 3, Tel Shiloh. If you are not familiar with the story of Tel Shiloh, essentially the story goes that the prophet Samuel, when his boy was brought to the high priest Eli, where he was brought to fulfill a vow to serve the Lord that his mother had made. While he was there, he saw that the sons of Eli, the high priest, were abusing the sacrifices, doing all sorts of things we're supposed to be doing and displeasing God. And Eli wouldn't do anything about it. He would just talk to them saying, please don't do that, but he wouldn't remove them or anything like that. Sound like church leadership today in the Novus Ordo? What God told Samuel, the boy Samuel, to do was to go to Eli and tell him that God had decided that he would remove Eli's family from the high priesthood and that Shiloh would be destroyed. Shiloh was rejected just like the Novus Ordo, and is a big precursor and is a big foreshadowing of our belief as SSPXers of the recognize but resist position. Samuel recognized Eli as the high priest because he was high priest. He recognized Shiloh as the house of God because it was the house of God. But he also called out the abuses that were going on as not pleasing to God and resisted authority when it was being abused. And he resisted Eli to his face, just like Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre did. So if you're an SSPXer and want to see the Marcel Lefebvre of the Iron One, go to Tel Shiloh. See where Samuel did it. That is essentially the first icon, is Tel Shiloh, and you can even go there. They found the structure where they think the tabernacle of Moses would have been, and you can go and stand in the exact spot where the Ark of the Covenant stood. So if you're SSPXer and you're watching and you're working with the Regina Pilgrimages, please visit Tel Shiloh. Please arrange a pilgrimage there. Number 12, the Tomb of the Patriarchs of Hebron. Okay, so this is a simple site. It is off the beaten path as Tracas. It is an Old Testament site. Cave of Machpelah, the Cave of the Patriarchs. It is currently a mosque/synagogue. But what's interesting about it is Christians, unlike Jews who can only go into one part and Muslims go into one part, can go into all parts. We as Christians can go into all parts. That includes us Tradcaths. So if you want to visit the Tomb of Abraham, you can go there. You can't celebrate Mass there, but you can absolutely go and visit, and I highly recommend it if you ever... It's one of the places I wanted to go as well, but no luck. But if you ever get a chance to go to Hebron and see the Tomb of the Patriarchs, please do so. Number 11, the Israel Museum. There's just so many things there. There's they have what we thought were Philistine coffins. Turns out they were Canaanite coffins. There's the treasures of Tel Adzor that Joshua probably destroyed. Ruins from Lachish. It's all this. They have all this stuff from the Holy Land. They have all this stuff from the history of the Holy Land, including an illicit altar that was destroyed in the reforms of King Josiah. And I'm going to talk more about that in some other sites and why that's significant for us as Traccaths. But because of that, because of that altar alone, which is, you see, one of the first things to see as you come into the entrance, it's definitely worth seeing because it prefigures our rejection of the modern ecumenical movement and our belief in outside the Catholic Church there is no salvation. Number 10, the baptismal site. Number 10, the baptismal site of Jesus Christ on the River Jordan. Again, this is probably is already on some of our pilgrimage site lists, but you usually think of Protestants going to get baptized in the River Jordan more so than Traccaths. That being said, it is a Catholic site. It is open to Catholic pilgrims. Everyone goes there, mind you, from what I understand. And it's right where Jesus would have been baptized. So if you ever want to go and renew your baptismal vows, definitely a place to go. And I really should, if I ever get a chance, to go there and make a bunch of long-form videos about the significance of that site. I really, really, really should. Because of all the significance theologically baptism has for us as Stratocasts. Number 9, Hezekiah's Tunnel and Broad Wall. So these are actually two sites. Hezekiah's Tunnel. It's a long water tunnel that leads to that King Hezekiah built during the Assyrian invasion, and Hezekiah's Broad Wall was built by Hezekiah to keep the Assyrians out during the invasion. They've uncovered it in archaeological excavations in the Jewish quarter. Definitely worth seeing. Hezekiah is extremely significant because he was the king of Judah who brought in a lot of the monotheistic reforms, and not just monotheistic reforms. He took down illicit altars to the God of Israel that had been set up outside of the temple in Jerusalem and said you can only worship in the temple in Jerusalem. I've even been in classes with biblical scholars who are definitely not traditionalists in their view. They're even somewhat more minimalist. And even they think that Hezekiah was doing this not out of political motivations, but because he sincerely believed this is what God wanted to be done. There was no political reasonings, rationale for doing that at that time. Hezekiah knew that there could only truly be one temple in Jerusalem, and he was putting down all these other illicit shrines. So to memorize King Hezekiah, it's such an obvious location. It is definitely worth seeing it. And why is that significant? Well, Hezekiah, he clearly did not believe in the separation of church and state, just like we as Tradacasts don't. And it's taking out the altars, that prefigures the fact that we as Tradacasts, just as Hezekiah believed there's only one true temple, we as Tradacasts believe that there's only one true church outside of which no one is saved, and outside of which offering sacrifice is not legitimate. And that is why we cannot take part in non-Catholic worship and non-Catholic prayer. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, visit Hezekiah's broad wall in honor of his memory. Number 8, Tel Dan. Again, this is one of the sites I've not been able to get to myself, but it is one of the illicit shrines of King Jeroboam the first that he had built. There's even some biblical stories that suggest that may date to even an earlier phase, but it was an idolatrous shrine that would have nominally at least been dedicated to the God of Israel. Again, this is on the theme of no ecumenism, and this reminds us that resisting the ecumenical spirit of the world, of worshiping God however people want rather than God's way, is something that Tracasts and our spiritual forebears, including the ancient kings of Israel and Judah who were good, and the prophets like Isaiah and Hezekiah, were fighting this for a long time. This is not a new battle. People were trying to worship God in improper ways, in idolatrous and sinful ways for centuries, even back then. And that is something that is really significant to us as Tracasts. Number 7, the Valley of Elah and Kabert Kayafa. So, Kabert Kayafa is a site that was excavated by one of my professors, Dr. Yossi Garfinkel, over the past few years. It essentially is very similar to a site like this. I had the privilege of going there. I filmed there a little bit. Not as much of the Valley of Elah as I would have liked. And it has the same design, but unlike these early Iron 1 sites, which were unfortified, it was fortified. And what's significant is that that there are a number of sites with that design that all circle around the land of Judah, and the center of that land is Jerusalem. And they are all dated to the 10th century BCE, which is the time of King David. So this, according to Dr. Yossi Garfinkel, one of the top biblical archaeologists in the world, is evidence that there was a kingdom of David at the time of King David in Jerusalem. And as you look over the Valley of Elah, where David fought Goliath, you can't just imagine what David would have saw. You can actually see what David would have saw in the Valley of Elah. And you can actually go there. So please go there, visit the Valley of Elah. It's one of the most famous biblical stories, and it's a national park. Go there, have a picnic, take a walk. Definitely see Kabert Kayafa, see the Valley of Elah. They even have what would have been an ancient shrine of the Judaic religion prior to when they would have had the temple. And they even have their old standing stones, which up to that point would have been allowed. Remember, that rule did not exist until the temple was built. Until then, they were allowed to sacrifice anywhere. And you can still see their ancient Israelite cultic site from the time of King David at the Valley of Elah. Number 6, Tel Es Sultan, a.k.a. the ruins of ancient Jericho. Why is this significant for us as Tracasts? Not just Tracasts, but Catholics in general should be visiting the site, is because it is associated with the veneration of saints. So, if you look at Joshua 5:14, Joshua is around the plains of Jericho trying to figure out how to destroy it. Then he sees someone standing. He says, "Are you with us, your enemies?" The man says, "Neither. I am but the prince host of the Lord." We know from the prophet Daniel that is a reference to angels, not the pre-incarnate Lord. It is very explicitly an angel, not the word incarnate who's before Joshua. What does Joshua do? He bows down before the angel and says, "What does my Lord say to the servant?" Whether the angel was coming as representative God, actually that's entirely the point. You show honor to God by honoring his representatives, and that would be the angels and saints. That is why we as Catholics venerate and vow for angels and saints. They aren't demigods, but they are representatives of the one true God, and when we show them honor, we are indirectly honoring God, and that is good, holy, true, and proper. And that is why we should visit Jericho, to remind us of the biblical fact of that truth. Number 5, the Synagogue Church of Nazareth. It is, so if you go to Nazareth, you go to the Melkite Church. People, of course, go to see the Basilica of the Annunciation, but the site of Jesus Childhood Synagogue is a functioning Melkite church. You go in, they have regular Sunday Mass, but off to the side, there's a little side chapel, and I had a privilege of going there. By the time this goes up, those videos should be released. I had the privilege of being able to go and pray dry mass prayers for my hometown in the synagogue, Jesus Childhood Synagogue, and even on the floors, the lower level, you can see the foundations of where the original synagogue of Jesus Christ was. It's not a far walk from the Basilica of the Annunciation in Nazareth. So definitely worth checking out. Number 4, and please, SSPX Pilgrims. Stella Maria's Monastery is beautiful, but this is a much bigger Carmelite site. The Deir el-Marak Carmelite Monastery. It is the site of the burning monastery. It is the location on Mount Carmel where Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal. His disciples eventually became the founders, according to Catholic tradition, of the Carmelite order. That is where it happened. That is why the disciples of Elijah eventually became the Carmelites were on Mount Carmel, because of what happened at that Carmelite monastery. I have not had the privilege of going there. I went to Stella Maria's instead thinking it was the same site or right next door. It's actually about an hour away by bus. So please, Regina Pilgrimages, put the Deir el-Marak Monastery on your list when you go arrange a pilgrimage to Holy Land again. Number 3, Lachish. Or more specifically, or as I call it, the Gate of Lachish, or as I really like to call it, the Holy Toilet of Lachish. So why is this significant for us as Trackcast? So if you go to ancient city of Lachish, which is a major historical site, would have been one of the major economic centers of the Kingdom of Judah in the time of King Hezekiah. Go into the city gate, ancient city gate. They've uncovered in excavations one of the illicit shrines that King Hezekiah put down. And they found this incense altar. They found this niche where a standing stone would have been. Hezekiah destroyed it and desecrated it by taking a toilet and putting it in the Holy of Holies. So, like I mentioned before, Hezekiah's reform is a precursor to our belief as traditional Catholics and outside the church's no salvation and the rejection of ecumenism. Just as you could not legitimately offer sacrifice outside of Jerusalem, so you cannot offer sacrifice outside the one true Big C Catholic Church. So, and how do we know this? Because Hezekiah already said what he thought about this. Chosen king of God, guided by the prophet Isaiah. And what did he say about where ecumenism belonged? Literally in the toilet. And to make his point, he took a toilet and chucked it into one of the Holy of Holies of these illicit shrines. Again, by the time this video goes up, I should have footage of that. That should already be up on the air. Number 2, Tel Arad. Again, another site that is famous for Hezekiah's reforms. They have this massive altar. It's in the desert of Judah near the Negev. And they had this Holy of Holies. It's a broad room temple. Had the privilege of going in there. Unfortunately, do not have long form footage of it as of yet. It might be well before I get it. But if you go into the Israel Museum, you can see, again, another reason why I should go to the Israel Museum. You can see the original standing stones and a replica of the interior of the shrine that they found. When this shrine was destroyed, the whole site wasn't destroyed. Only it had been destroyed. Standing stones have been taken down, laid face down, and buried over. And the site and the grounds on which the temple was built were repurposed. That is some purpose. This shows that there's intentional cancellation of the illicit that was going on at Tel Arad. It is a reminder that even just because you pray and offer sacrifice, if it's not in the Temple of Jerusalem, i.e. not in the Big C Catholic Church, it is not pleasing to God. And finally, number 1 site that is not on Trackcast wish lists, but should be in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount itself. The Temple Mount in Jerusalem is one of the most politically intense places on earth. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's just the fact of the matter. whenever I go up there, I do not bring my rosary in case they take it from me, because they only allow Muslims to pray up there for political reasons. That being said, they do allow tours up there all the time. Christian tours too. And if you went up there is so much that is significant to us as trad cats. It is the literal physical prefigurement on earth of the one true church outside of which none is saved. I've actually was privileged enough to film a YouTube video, which I'm not sure if it'll be up by the time this goes up. I suck as an editor. But it's a site where Jesus Christ drove the money changers out of the temple. It is a site where the fifth of the joyful mysteries took place. It's where the presentation took place. It's where the Nunc Dimittis was first sung. It's where the Temple of Solomon stood. It's where Jesus claimed himself to be God. He says, it's where Jesus said, but quote, before Abraham was, I am. And I remember in my YouTube video that I filmed there, I walked to where Jesus stood, and guess what? It's still rocky. There's still plenty of stones to pick up and throw at people in theory. It's just amazing to go there, and it again for us as trad cats in particular, it prefigures the forgotten doctrine of outside the church there is no salvation. It prefigures the doctrine of the falsehood of ecumenism, prayer in common with heretics. You cannot pray outside the true church, just as you cannot offer sacrifice outside the temple. There is no salvation outside of the Big C Catholic Church, just as there is no sacrifice that was acceptable to God outside of the temple. And all the other things that be taken down. All the other illicit temples that be taken down, even if at one point they were legitimate. And so that is a great lesson for us as trad cats. It is something that needs to be on the SSPX pilgrimage site tour. Anyway, those are my top 15 sites to visit. If you ever come to the Holy Land, if you're a traditional Catholic, please, if you're working with Regina Pilgrimages, please put at least the top 5, 10, or 6 or something, or whatever, on this list. It's so relevant to us as trad cats. Anyway, God bless. Have a great day. If you ever have a chance in your life, please check out SSPX Church. Please go on SSPX Pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Definitely worthwhile experience. God bless. Have a great day. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedictus et benedictus Spiritus Sanctus Iesu, Sancta Maria Mater, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et nostre, amen. St. Louis IX, ora pro nobis, teneresque unto Satyr kings who are in purgatory without exception, the Lord have patience upon them. May the souls and the souls of all the faithful departed in mercy, God rest in peace. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen.